Ideally, we should never have food safety recalls. The goal should be zero by anybody and everybody. Traceability is not going to fix that. It's going to be about you understanding food safety practices and prevention up front, so you don't even have to go backwards and trace it.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chains, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reid.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
Reid and I just had a great conversation with Brian Schaneberg, the Executive Director at Illinois Tech Institute for Food Safety and Health. Brian shared so much information about food recalls, food safety, how data is so very important in our food ecosystem, what different types of food outbreaks or recalls there could be, because sometimes it's food related and sometimes it's just the label. And sometimes it's allergens, which is so very important. We talked about what's coming up, how 2D barcodes can help, and how data is so very important. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're really looking forward to this conversation. It's really important. We all eat food. So talking about food safety and recalls is something near and dear to all of our hearts. Before we jump in, share a little bit about your background and the work that you're involved in.
Yeah, and I would agree. We all love food in some form, and so we always hope it's going to be safe and wholesome in some way. And that's kind of what the mission is that we drive towards here today at the Institute for Food Safety and Health. But my journey never took me to food. My food was never in my forecast. It wasn't even in my radar as a kid growing up. Nature, outdoors, science, plants, how plants can benefit you. So there's that tie a little bit, but it was always kind of going that way. And of course, parents are like, you're going to do this because this is where the track is. Engineering is this big world back in the 80s. But within the first semester, I'm like, I don't like calculus. I don't like numbers. I like chemistry. It's just a different mindset than calculus. And so fell into chemistry and biology as a degree. Didn't know what I was going to do. Probably pharmaceutical research of some sort, right? Kind of when you think about that back then, because you're not really told back then that food science is even an option or even that it's a degree in the United States. Much more recognized outside the US in other countries than here in the US. And so I just kind of looked at it and said, yeah, I'm just going to keep going to grad school because I didn't know where I wanted to work. And then I went to Virginia Commonwealth University and did a PhD in organic natural products chemistry. So it started to tie together the idea of folklore and medicine and how they're used and taking plants and then finding out why, right? So what's the benefit in them, and can we then create anti-cancer drugs with things like that, or even anti-insecticidals? So that was kind of some of the work that I did as my PhD program. The journey then took me to a postdoc at the University of Mississippi, and that was at the National Center for Natural Products Research, one of the FDA Centers of Excellence, which I'll talk a little bit more about once I talk about iFish. And that was actually dietary supplement natural products based. So as the GLPs and everything was moving in the dietary supplement rollout in the 90s, they needed methods for adulteration and safety and identity and all those things. So that was a great step up in that direction for me in the natural product space. It just kind of fell into place. Had a great time there for a few years. And Eli Manning was quarterback, so couldn't complain about the football time at Oxford there at Ole Miss during that period. But knowing I wanted to continue on into industry at some point, ended up at a contract research lab, which most of them have been bought up. But it was in the natural products, dietary supplement space, but also helping a lot of the big food companies, looking at functional ingredients and what they're going to start using in their portfolios. Then Mars came calling, Mars Incorporated. They wanted to launch their first dietary supplement onto the market. And so I got the pleasure of actually helping with that great team based on their great science of, again, the research or using cocoa and the cocoa flavonols and what that history was around the science and health and wellness. Then on I went to Starbucks into the regulatory and science affairs side of things. So now I'm in the food space. Then that's where Mars kind of gave me that eyes into food and food safety, is because leading kind of that group of experts in supplements, then it put me on their global stage of contacts and their programs, whether that's documentations, their auditing systems, understanding what hazards are. And that's really started me on that food journey. And then Starbucks, of course, being all food, where they do that. And again, health and wellness, hazards, what's coffee for us, what's sustainability look like. And it's a global platform. And so I had a great time with them for almost 10 years. Wasn't looking to leave Seattle, but then sometimes doors open and you kind of have to step into that and take a chance. And here I am now as an academic here at the Institute for Food Safety and Health, which is part of the Illinois Institute of Technology's Institute programs of research. So we are part of the university. We are almost 40 years old under the program that we are, and we're the first FDA Center of Excellence formed almost 40 years ago, which then led to the Mississippi one. There's one at University of Maryland and another at UC Davis, again, with food safety in mind in the various aspects of what we have as expertise. But it was with the notion here of bringing together industry, academics, and then having FDA and government connect and work together, trying to solve the pressing food safety questions of the time, whether that's looking at technologies that could be used and validating those technologies, or it's things happening in the moment. We need to figure out why they're happening in the moment. Like, why were peaches recalled for salmonella? That made no sense. We're able to step in and do some of the research to understand it became airborne from the chicken plant or chicken farm next door. So it's interesting how you learn about all these little microbes and pathogens, how they survive through their systems. And so it's kind of fun being back into the science world, the academic world, but still getting to really touch base with the regulators, working closely with the scientists at the regulatory side that's helping guidance, build these programs, as well as trainings, which really kind of leads us to where we're going to talk more around traceability data and what that whole means from basically from farm to table. How do we then connect all those dots to try to make a safe product? So again, that's a long journey. Just kind of took it as it went and landed where I did. But I'm also an Illinois native, so really it's coming back home after 25 years, living all over the U.S.
That's amazing. So we're here today talking about food safety, and recalls is a big part of this. And you don't have to look far in the news to find that recalls kind of seem to be everywhere now. We've talked about this, so really kind of teeing it up, but from your perspective, are we actually getting worse? What's the part of the story that, the general public might be missing because it's just boom in your face, another salmonella, another this, another that, don't eat the spinach, all of it?
So understandable that people are starting to feel that way. In part, it's the blessing of having this little piece of a device or technology in our hand that's got all this great information, but also because of that information, we're getting overloaded and a lot of things coming at us. So the answer is a yes and no. There's never an easy way to say that, right? But the reality is when it comes to recalls or things like that on the market, and 1 year does not make a trend as well, right? So it's also looking at the whole data set as a whole. So FDA has a great dashboard they built now, goes all the way back to 2011 for recalls. Does a great job of showing the trend, and you can look at it. You can look at it in two buckets. One is the actual event, meaning a firm has an event, so they track that as one single number. And then you have actual total products from that event for recall. So then you'll see another chart specific to the total of products. So with that being said, their fiscal year, if you will, goes October to September. So when you look at that, put that in context as well. So yes, between 24 and 2025, there was an increase in recall events, but a decrease in total products recalls.
Oh,
yeah. When you look at the class, meaning 1, 2, or 3, 1 being the worst, right? If you eat it, it's caused or will cause death, illness, or severity. Class 2, probable, and then class 3, not going to cause a problem. That's usually mislabeled or something, or quality issue. You would see also a decrease in class 1s and an increase in class 2. So you're seeing a shift in the more severe over that time period to less severe. Ideally, you want to get all the way to 3 or just not even have them recalled at all, but you're seeing a change. And if you really also look at the data set and go back to 2015, 2017, we were way higher in recalls of both. So we've already been down and been on a downward trend. We will have to see what this 2026 looks like to see if there's another trend starting to happen and why, right? So we'd also have to then ask the question, why is this happening? It could be a lot of things. And what I find interesting, just kind of looking at the data today, so we're 6 months into 2026 under their calendar. If we stay on trend, we will have more events than last year. It'll be slightly higher again. It seems like there's more physical hazard events taking place now, plastic, metal, or things being found in product. If you see I've been seeing a lot of those pop. A lot of them are prevented. So if you really also want to see what's actually impacting a consumer head on, CDC is going to track that, right? Any event that's one or more than one person to that's an outbreak from a foodborne illness perspective. And they track that. And so that's your pathogens and those things like that, whether it's salmonella, E. coli, and so forth. You have a lot of push now at allergens, creating that space of recall. And that's usually been where the most had been, is mislabeled product, on accident within the firm, or wrong ingredient used, or cross-contamination of unintended consequence. And so, again, it's all nuanced in some of how this is all flowing. And I think it's interesting when I look at it, if I think back to, do we see a trend potentially going up? So one, you had Food Safety Modernization Act, which really started us on a journey of prevention, and FDA having full recall authority now. They never had that before the Food Safety Modernization Act, which most consumers probably be like, are you kidding? Is that real? Yeah, it's real. They actually didn't have legal authority to force a firm to recall. They could still take them to court, but they couldn't force them in that sense. Now they can. And when you're seeing these preventions, so anytime now a company finds that, hey, we found a study, we found a test, it's telling or indicating something, they now do the preventive recall. And so a lot of the products on the market that have been recalled haven't actually led to an illness that's been traced or tracked or confirmed within the system. So that's that. So I know I've been talking a lot, but I keep going, but I'll let you go on, Reid, with any next questions or comment.
No, just staying on this topic, I kind of feel like it's one of those statistical kind of mathematical things where we weren't looking at it as much before. Now we are. And I feel that there's a lot more of self-imposed recalls by brands and manufacturers, even facilitators, if you will. It's not the brand, but we make the product for the brand. And they're like, hey, we're going to recall this batch and lot because we had a problem in the facilities and somebody dropped a bag into the mixer bowl, and we're not going to take a chance. We're just going to pull it off. So I feel like it's twofold, whereas you just said, the FDA finally has the full capability to invoke a recall where before they didn't, and you had to go to court. And like, oh, great, let's go to court. Let's spend a couple of weeks and months and, quarters trying to figure this out while things are happening. Now I think because of this, we're seeing both sides being proactive. And yes, you might have more recalls, but they're more isolated for better reasons. I would much rather have that than go back to the 80s.
It's the prevention mantra, right? I mean, the whole idea of FSMA was prevention. Everything before that was about reaction. And so you have that. And regulation put the onus where it always should have been and probably always was. But if you're making food and it's your brand, and you're going to put it on the shelf for a consumer to eat and consume, you're responsible, period, for the safety of that product. And so that's also part of that, right? Is that, hey, I found this, I've got the data based on my food safety plan, my controls and my processes that tells me I've got something. I better take action. Because if I don't and something happens, or FDA comes in and does their typical audit, finds that you had an event and did nothing about it, you're also going to get dinged pretty hard on that and potentially use your FDA license for manufacturing food.
Yeah.
Right. So it's about putting the onus back where it should be, which is industry. If you're going to make this and you're going to profit off the consumer, it's your job to make sure it's safe.
We have something exciting to share with you. It's a special podcast discount for our favorite event of the year.
GS1 Connect.
That is right, our annual supply chain focus conference, and this year it's in Las Vegas 2026.
I cannot wait. Reid, how many GS1 Connects have you been to?
I believe it's been 7.
Okay. So it's a few less than I've been to. It's all good. I love going to Connect to meet our attendees every single year who bring so many great examples from grocery, food service, retail, and healthcare about how they solve supply chain visibility challenges. And in 2026, Las Vegas gives us the perfect excuse for a few puns about how GS1 standards can help you make bold moves that lead to big wins.
Oh, I see where you're going with this, Liz, and I can play. GS1 Connect is your chance to deal yourself a winning hand in operations with the power of GS1 standards.
Wait, I got a better one. GS1 Connect is also the perfect place to hit the jackpot on connections from the exhibitor floor to the networking table and forge high-value relationships that pay dividends long after the bright lights fade.
That was pretty good. Learning strategies worth betting on for sure, but you can hear from trailblazers across the industry and walk away with bold insights that help you turn risk into rewards.
I like it. Okay, and that may be enough puns for the day. Wait, I just thought of one more. If your supply chain feels like a roll of the dice, GS1 Connect in Las Vegas is your sure bet for success. So mark your calendars from June 9th to 11th and join us at GS1 Connect. It's time to take your supply chain game to the next level. As a podcast listener, we are able to extend a special discount.
That's right, Liz. As a podcast listener, you can get 10% off the registration price. Go to connect.gs1us.org to register and enter the promo code GS1USPOD10 to take advantage of this offer. If you've never been to GS1 Connect, or if you've gone a dozen times, there's always something new to learn and new people to meet.
Absolutely. Again, the website is connect.gs1us.org, and the promo code is GS1USPOD10. See you there. You mentioned FSMA, and I kind of have a two-pronged question. So Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, has been around since 2011. We have been hearing more about it because of FSMA Rule 204, Section 204, and the traceability rule. Can you just give us a quick overview of FSMA as a whole? And then Section 204, and I know it isn't, we've got, it's in effect, it's not into compliance, that's in 2028, but it's not going to limit recalls altogether. Can you just talk a little about how FSMA, overarching, and then how FSMA, this specific traceability rule, play with industry?
Absolutely. FSMA, it's kind of thing when you say 2011, that was a long time ago, right? When this was signed into law. But within that, of course, it doesn't just trigger a switch at 2011 that everything is this, right? So under the law, a bunch of actual rules had to be developed based on Congress's mandate in specific areas. So one of those is preventative controls for human foods. There's another one for animal foods. There's foreign supplier verification, intentional filtration. So they have a lot of these areas to think about where there might be risk in the food supply chain. And so as those rules were put out, then the compliance dates were propagated based on usually size of companies to meet those. That's where you start to see, and that could be partly why you saw some recalls really heading hard at 2015 to 17, right? People started getting in there and really developing food safety plans and finding out more that they needed to take more action, possibly, right? I don't have the full root cause of all those, but potentially that's why you saw that bump up. And then as people started getting better at it and understanding it better, you saw that then slide back down and kind of plateau off. So that's kind of FSMA, and as their rules are coming out. And now here we are to the one you're talking about, which is the food traceability rule many years later, which is really kind of the last one out of the FSMA bucket of compliance and the act itself. And the intent of it is, it's not necessarily that it's going to change or reduce recalls, because this is all about data.
Yeah.
Food traceability is nothing about food safety, actually. It's a data exercise. And the idea is, by having better data, better traceability, better knowledge, I can get product off the market faster. And I can be much more surgical on what needs to be taken from market. So it's going to be twofold. It's helping the consumer. It's also helping you as a company, because you're not going to be throwing away as much waste instead of a broad recall, because you don't know where it came from and you don't know where it's spread out in your actual supply chain. So ideally, that's what this should play out. The trainings for this is now all launching. The Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance, which is part of the Institute and was funded through the FDA programs, was designed to build these training across multiple roles to help small and medium come up to knowledge base. Doesn't mean you're going to comply just because you take it, but it's going to help get you on the journey of answering the right questions, like the food safety for preventive controls for human foods. It's going to teach you how to do a food safety plan. It's going to teach you how to understand risk and hazard assessment. And it's going to make sure you have a preventive control qualified individual on staff, and that's a certificate you'll get from that, right? So it's just trying to give you the tools and the understanding, but understanding it's not a one and done. It's your journey to continue and build that toolbox of food safety knowledge, because what was 10 years ago is different than today. We can look at powdered infant formula being one of those unexpected things. In the most recent recall was spores being found in the products in Europe, right? Some things that we just didn't expect, or the McDonald's large recall where the onions in Colorado had E. coli. I think it was E. coli, if I remember right. Again, unexpected. These are things that typically aren't found in that commodity. And so it has to then, you got to now assess your hazard programs and understand, okay, now I have to consider this in my plan for prevention. So it's all a learning journey. But this in FTR, I think where it's really important for you in GS1 will always be, it's a data exercise.
Yeah.
It's going to be from beginning to end under the products and things that are under the rule, right? So there is actual list that must comply with FTR. Many things are exempt from FTR because they aren't as high risk conceptually as what these products would be.
Yeah.
Two things I'm taking away from this. I'm going to jump into a question about the data, but you mentioned journey a couple of times and we talked about 2011 and then you have to this has to get out into the world and it has to get out into our states and all this stuff. And I think we have to keep that in mind. It's not like, hey, this is 204, boom, done, flip the light switch on and it's all over. Liz and I have been talking about this for a while. She's been educating me for a long time on this. And each time it's like peeling back the onion a bit more as to a step, a process, a procedure, an update. So let's just talk. You mentioned that it's all about the data and it's a data exercise. So how important are the data sets and traceability? How's this going to help recalls become more targeted, less disruptive? Because a lot of folks, the general population, a factory that's making food, and it's, oh, great, another regulatory thing. But in the end, it might actually help me. It might make me more efficient, might make me better. I think that, we look at it from a lot of different angles. So I'd love your take on this. Like, how disruptive is it going to be?
The disruption will be probably within companies that just haven't updated a lot of their internal technology. Meaning, we all use codes. Everybody in this industry is using a code to track something within their company, whether it's handheld or handwritten or on a spreadsheet, or they've got some technology that's old and it automatically assigns a lot number of code or things on it based on some format. So the disruption will absolutely be a cost in some form because there's going to be a required data set that must now meet the requirement under the rule, and it must match from basically the beginning to end for any products on the list. So that'll be the big disruption. So people are going to have time with that to understand. And I will tell you, even myself, as I've sat in on the trainings and learning as we've been building the program, it's a whole new set of acronyms on top of that.
Yeah.
So even my brain is now having to learn a whole new set of acronyms of, wait, what is that? It's a what? And, we even they even list them. If you go to the website, it's great because they have a really good 4-pager. Great way to look at food traceability in a simple format that details some of that. But like a critical tracking event, a CTE they'll talk about, or a KDI, or a food traceability list, or KDE events, right? There's all these things that they start to define within processing the food, and it will determine when you must trigger your food traceability process. And I think it'll be interesting with farms and restaurants. So if I look at the two ends of the spectrum, that's going to be new for them because the farms are going to now be required to basically map their entire farm if they've got a product on that list. And not just that they do it on their farm, they now have to map it to the location it's grown on their farm. That FTR will define how they must list the food, define that within their scope and file it and have it on record for traceability. Then that number and value will transfer to the next person. They takes the product, transfers. But it's got to be the same. It cannot change. Then you get to the restaurant where products are now impacted, which typically you think of FDA, you don't think of restaurants. Because you think more packaged manufactured foods, things like that. Well, no, this rule actually impacts restaurants, meaning when they receive a product from this list, they now have to maintain that record of that product for, I can't remember the timeline, that each of them has a different timeline to hold on to the record, but they now have to file that, keep that in their system. So you can see it from farm to your restaurant and you can trace it. I would say FDA, at least in the technology world, when they do request information on this topic from you, they basically give you 24 hours to turn around a searchable electronic spreadsheet. So, right. So at least it's simple in that way. You just got to be able to pull out what the information is from your file to get it in simple form for them. And that you can negotiate the 24 hours. It just depends, but that's the rule right now is within 24 hours, right? So there's going to be some learning there on measure. And it's not a lot of data on the spreadsheet, but how do you take potentially data from your database and get it in a way, and maybe AI plays a role in that to help you within your company. I don't know. All the technology is moving very quickly. So I think over time, we'll get there pretty quickly. It's just more what's the cost it's going to be to your small and medium guys to try to get up to compliance. Hence the reason it's moved to 2028, because again, they realized if they tried, it would have been in compliance already, 2026. Right. Even the big guys are still struggling a little bit with their data set.
Yeah, change is inevitable, right? I mean, change is going to happen. If you're trying to fight change, you're fighting an uphill battle. It's like death and taxes. It's coming. It's going to happen.
And to add to that change thing, Reid, it's also the want and need by consumers for innovation, new ingredients, better, healthier for me. I put that in quotes because whatever that means is different for each person. But the more complexity you add to the supply chain, which used to be very simple, in one plant making one product, and now you've got 20 products with 50 different ingredients with potential allergens about. We have also had consumers push us in a way that's also created a much more difficult and strenuous part of the manufacturing system.
I've always been taught, look at as a problem as an opportunity. And here you go, you got the FDA coming in saying, hey, okay, farmers, now you got to map everything out. We've never done this. This is a big problem. But now it's recall. If I have it mapped out, I might only have to recall a certain section of my farm and not all of my farms, which could be some of these farms cross states. This is not like a little farmer. This is like corporations. And so you see it today. I live in outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, and 2 minutes you're out in the rural areas and you see the signs. Here's the seed that was used for this corn, and the next field is a little bit different and it's still owned by the same farmer. There's upside there too, but change is tough. Still tough.
Yeah, change is tough. And I think that as you get more digital, as these organizations go from paper and handwritten, there are efficiencies that will be gained, including more precise recalls when and if something happens.
In the end, it's going to be a return on investment that ideally will save you money in the long run.
Yes.
Yeah. Because you don't have the recall or smaller. You don't have the lawsuit because, if you start to get in there and it's going to be tracked to you and it was your fault for whatever reason, right? You've got the lawsuit potential. So although that's a hard number to really project, it's a true number because we've seen big companies and big farms get impacted by it, whether you look at cantaloupes and peanuts and things like that in the past.
Yeah. I think we already touched on this a little bit, but from a food recall perspective, and I guess going a little bit away from the food traceability rule, and you talked about class 3, why are so many recalls like precautionary instead of reactive, more that proactive? You talked about allergens or cross-contamination. I'm assuming those are examples, but are there other examples too of why companies would want to get products off the shelf that aren't like foodborne illness related?
Sure. There are triggers that do require recall once you find out the information.
Okay.
And so allergens are a automatic you're not going to get a 3 with an allergen. It's at minimum 2, class 2.
Okay.
Like if you go to the database, there's barely any 3s. So that tells you a 3 would be if you did mislabel something, but there wasn't an allergen issue, there wasn't a physical hazard, there wasn't all these other things. It's just going to taste different. That's going to be a 3 because it's still misleading to the consumer because you're telling them that it tastes like something that it's not.
Yeah.
That's where a 3 would be. Anything allergen is going to be base of 2 and could potentially be a 1 because we know it's in there, and if somebody consumes that product, they will die. So that kind of plays you in your scope of the 1 to 2. Hopefully that helps you at least clarify that aspect. In terms of precautionary, it's really not as much precautionary as the law requires you when you know X, you recall. And we call it precautionary because it's preventive. So it's more, we found, and go all the way back, I think a couple of years ago, we had all that chicken recall. And I'll just do a quick side note. Also, we're talking FDA right now for the most part. They have a lot of the products that are part of that. USDA has their own process, different. Again, they have their product lines, so meats and things like that, meat there. Cosmetics have their own. They're all different in that stream of things. But within the food and the precautionary principle is if we stop it and that chicken that was found to have listeria in a post-test, even though nobody had gotten sick, but because they found it in the post-test, they'd have to pull it from the market.
Okay.
Right? Because it's called precaution. That's where it's prevention and precautionary, because although we didn't find it in terms of illness, we have found it in our testing. Thus, we can't take the risk, and now it becomes a class recall because of that.
The traceability rule is a big shift as we're getting into with all of this. Based on the companies you've worked with most, what should they be prioritizing right now to stay compliant?
Well, the big guys are already on it. They've been on it. They're already developing the processes and procedures in their data flow. And again, these are only the products on the traceability list. Now, I think this could help them long run on everything. Right? In theory, if you have one good internal tracking system. In the old days, it was always the one step up, the one step back kind of mantra, even though it was never really written in the regulation. But that's kind of how you would look at it. I know my supplier behind me. I know where I'm sending it up front. That's my traceability. That'll still really work for products not on the traceability list. The big guys now, and it'll be interesting to see where the intermediaries in there, meaning the suppliers, right, that don't want to give up their secrets, right, is what they'll tell you. There's going to be a little more openness that they're not going to have to share with the vendor group in that. Now, they may still work out how to best balance the data and information to protect IP, but there's going to be more transparent flow of information. So I think it'll be interesting to see how much the big guys are able to get those suppliers to comply to that. And then with that, hopefully it trickles to where the small, medium guys who don't necessarily have as much leverage in scale will benefit from that as well.
As we're kind of looking forward, and we talked about data and we talked about supply chains getting more complex, I would love to hear your thoughts around the future of food safety and tools like the 2D barcode or the QR code, because they contain more, or they have the ability to contain more data. How is that going to push industry forward from a traceability perspective?
Well, I think anytime you have one source of truth, you're going to be better off. Now, whatever technology that's going to look like, and technology is changing rapidly, in the end, it's data. Where's the data sit? So when we talk artificial intelligence, it's no different than our human brain, right? We have a brain full of stuff, but it only comes out when asked the question. Now, sometimes it comes out because we feel we see something and we trigger a response, but it's still reacting to something, right? So there's a stimulus that tells our brain, you've got this information, here's the dump. It's going to be the same with AI, right? So it's going to be all the right information in the brain of the AI. And then it's going to be the right questions that you ask of it. So if bad data is in, you're going to get bad data out. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the barcodes and all these technologies build the right structure that gets the right data into it so people can ask the right question. And I think if we think about food safety in that, ideally, we should never have food safety recalls. The goal should be zero.
Yeah.
By anybody and everybody. Traceability is not going to fix that, really. It's going to be about you understanding food practices and food safety practices prevention up front, so you don't even have to go backwards and trace it back, if you will. That's the ideal world. But that's a reality that doesn't exist today because food is dynamic, the environment's dynamic, and we can't get to a place of zero, especially when you're talking about healthy, wholesome produce that comes from the ground. It's just the natural environment we live in, and that keeps changing. Microbes, the pathogens, they evolve, they change, they move, they do things. So we just have to always be vigilant in our science and try to get better at controlling it. Where data might help here is the more data you start to track in this code, will suppliers or manufacturers be able to use that to maybe say, hey, I have a weather event or a weather season or a dry season. Does that start to trigger more risk or prevention questions from this region compared to another region?
Yeah.
Or you can even look at Fukushima when all that happened.
Yeah.
You start to look at all the cesium being found in the shrimp, coming from Asia. That's data that now starts to tell you my supply chain might need to shift in that to make sure I could complete good product to my consumer, whatever that might be, right? Doesn't mean it's necessarily unsafe, but it's still triggering things to stop the flow, which is going to be at the bottom line, loss in money. So I think that's where that will help.
You just brought me back to a previous life where I used to do environmental consulting, and we used to go in and test for Legionnaires. And you'd go into the HVAC systems and into the drip pans and, take the water and test it for Legionnaires. Because of temperatures and precipitation rates and all these other things, it's really no different, right? Like you could be pulling the same potato out of the ground all the time, but a new weather event might have a big impact that could, you didn't plan for.
Right. A flooding event, it moves water through a place you didn't, and it all of a sudden brings all this bad stuff with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like a hurricane with a farm right in front of your house. Now all the cows, what's in your yard.
That is where I think this helps too, potentially barcoding this information is if you can put the data with it. So when I say food safety, it's not going to solve food safety. It could help food safety. Right. So maybe it's data that's in there. So if I think about farming, so when I mentioned the peaches where you didn't expect to find salmonella on peaches, but then now you see that it can be airborne coming from a chicken farm because it can desiccate and dry out and fly. And then once you reactivate it, you get sick. That now tells you I need to think about the farming system different and I need to grow different. And so maybe peach trees should not be next door to
downwind
within X radius, right? Yeah. And so that could be any commodity, whether it's apples or oranges or things that you're going to take and eat. If people are not good at washing when they get home, you can see where some of this is. And we aren't. I guarantee you most consumers aren't really good at taking product home and following the typical guidance of washing their produce.
Sometimes all of these conversations make me never want to eat again.
But I still eat it. I love my sushi and I will go to town on it any day.
Okay, good. Well, that makes me feel better coming from you.
I think that's always the important part is, when we started this conversation front end, should we be worried about recalls and all these things going on? No. But we all are getting all this overloaded data. We still have one of the safest food systems in the world.
Yeah.
And people need to feel good about the food that we eat.
Yeah.
That's not talking about the wholesomeness of it. That's talking about the safe product that you get in your hand and eat in that sense.
It truly is amazing when you look at the amount of food that is grown and transported and produced and moved and touched by, countless hands before it reaches your table. Like, it's quite unbelievable. Let's not lose sight of it so we don't, we stay on top of it. Preventative versus reactive.
And it's not even just the food itself. It's changing the model of the packaging that we start to use in the food, right? You can start to see all these other attributes that start to connect, right? The packaging should be just as traceable on that food as the food itself. With the whole sustainability mantra that we're in and the compostability things that we want to have, well, what does that now mean? Is it going to have a cross-contact of contamination that hits the food that we just didn't expect? So there's a whole system and process that's going to be looking at. And if it is compostable and it goes into the environment, does it then recycle itself up into the plant in another bad way, right? There's so many bigger questions that we still always have to do. And this is where science is always going to play a role in understanding that and trying to best look forward to prevent the best we can. But the human mind is not perfect. And AI won't be perfect either. They're just all tools that hopefully will help us be stronger and better.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, Brian. Well, this has been enlightening. I'm still Liz, I'm having lunch after this. I mean, I'm going to go, I'm starving. We're running out of time. We have two last questions for you. The first question I'll go with, and what we'd like to know is just, what's your favorite technology right now?
For me, it's actually getting on the AI bus. Not slow to adapt, but just hadn't really started to play with it. I've started to play with it just in the last few months, and it's really helped more from a writing perspective and using AI to help ask questions. It's better, more efficient, I'm finding, than just the general internet search.
Yep.
But I can have it write things and do things. Now, still, you got to go through it, do all the review and the quality check and all those things to make sure. But man, the efficiencies it's bringing, I'm finding it to be amazing. Even just in generally asking simple questions at home. An example, I talked to a lawyer because I needed a document for something. They still never could answer my question. I never could figure out in estate planning. I asked one of the AI models, boom, 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 boom. I'm like, that makes sense. I need to call this person. This is the piece of paper I need. It's going to really streamline. So that's where I'm more excited is how's it making my life a little more efficient, faster, and better in that sense.
Yeah, I'm getting there. My kids are.
It's just slow for all of us to change, right?
Yeah.
You can think of my mom or think of us. Or when I talked about myself back, I'm like, we didn't have phones. We didn't have them in our hands. We had to go figure out in the country how to have fun on the farm.
Yes.
With no cable, 3 channels to maybe pick from.
That you had to get up and change.
Exactly. And hopefully the antenna, you had to maybe change that to get it to change. Yeah.
Good old days.
We're all dating ourselves on this conversation, but
it's so
we all
nice.
have to change. This just shows you who can. And man, accepting that change is actually more powerful than kind of holding back and getting scared of it.
Yeah, agree.
Reader's not saying anything. He's just looking at us and laughing.
I'm just laughing because, I'm the youngest in my family, and they would call you remote. That meant you had to get up and change the channel. They're like, use the remote. And I was the remote.
That's awesome. Do they still call you remote?
No.
Okay. Brian, last question. What is something new that you would like to learn about in the near future?
Whew. That's always a hard one because I feel like I'm always wanting to learn. I still try to really understand how best to communicate what we do effectively to this really new generation of technology savvy, how they take information in, how it comes out. And that's where I still want to get better at, right? I can simplify a concept, but that still doesn't mean it resonates. So what is it that we need to do? And so that's where I've been really trying to figure out, how do I really best leverage the information I have for the audience that needs it correctly to make change.
And it's hard to do because every audience is going to come with a different lens.
Right. A different story, a different why.
Yep.
And so that's for me always the journey. And I find that to be always my objective and adventure of learning is like, okay, this is going to be a tough task. Now I'm going to see how I get people there.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's awesome. Well, that's all the time we have. Brian, thank you so much. And thank you for the work that you do. This way, I'm going to enjoy lunch today, but I think it'll put Liz a little more ease that we have people out there being focused on the prevention of food issues. Right. So, but this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. And thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.